Hello London, we are ready for your vote.
Hello, I'm Stephen Perkins, and this is Douze Points, the Eurovision podcast from the team behind Binge Watch. It is Monday, 9th of September, and the big news from the last fortnight is, of course, that we will be heading to Basel for Eurovision in 2025. The decision was announced on 30th of August, with the contest's executive supervisor Martin Osterdahl, boo hiss, saying Basel's strategic location at the crossroads of Europe makes it the ideal setting for an event that celebrates the power of music to connect people across borders. With its unique blend of tradition and innovation, Basel reflects the spirit of the Eurovision Song Contest. The city's exceptional St Jakobshalle venue and outstanding hospitality will ensure a memorable experience for delegations, artists and fans alike. Although this is Switzerland's third time hosting the contest, it will be the first time that it staged Eurovision in one of the country's German-speaking cantons, having hosted the very first Eurovision in the Italophone city of Lugano in 1956 and the Francophone Lausanne in 1989. In other news, although the contest is still 8 months away, we already have our first confirmed artist for 2025. Theo Evan has been announced as the Cypriot representative next year. He released his debut single The Wall in 2021, and apparently, if you look closely, you can also spot him as a supporting artist in Season 2 of HBO's Euphoria. He was internally selected by broadcaster CBC, and details of the song that he will be performing will of course be revealed in due course. In one of the stranger Eurovision-related stories I've seen recently, Polish broadcaster TVP has issued a statement denying that JoJo Siwa will be representing Poland at Eurovision in 2025. The Dance Mom star had fueled speculation after making comments on social media that she had been in discussions about representing Poland in the contest, but TVP have stated that they are not currently in discussions with any artist about 2025 and that their focus for now is on this year's Junior Eurovision. Germany's head of delegation, Alexandra Wolfslas, has spoken out about the impact of the tensions at this year's contest. In an interview with the Eurotrip podcast, she said, "It was very disturbing. We really felt it during the preparations for the grand final. It was really shocking to me. We knew all about the political stresses going on, and it had an impact on the Eurovision Song Contest in a way it never had before." She added, "I always thought the greatest thing ever is that every country gets along with each other. The artists are respecting each other, cheering for each other. That dramatically changed last year. Normally when artists come to the green room, everybody is applauding them, and all of a sudden, some artists are not applauding other artists. I thought that was really disturbing. I really hope we can do whatever we can to make sure this does not happen again. This harmed the brand, in my opinion." Personally, I'm not sure that the lack of applause in the green room was anywhere near the biggest problem at last year's contest, but it is an interesting point nonetheless. And finally, Iceland have postponed their announcement on their participation at Eurovision in 2025. They were due to make their decision on 5th of September, but Iceland's head of delegation Runar Freyr Gislason said in a statement, "We are still reviewing some issues, including at a meeting that our representatives and representatives of other nations will attend with the representatives of Eurovision after the weekend. The deadline to confirm participation in Eurovision is September 15th. We will announce our decision before then." So, after a lengthy wait, 4 months, we now know that Basel will be the destination for the Eurovision Song Contest in 2025. While we were waiting for the city to be announced, we got to thinking about everything that would be going into this decision, and the criteria that would be used to winnow down all of the bidding cities until only one remained. So, with that in mind, it seemed like this would be a great opportunity to take a look at exactly what it takes to be a Eurovision host city. As far as I can determine, although there are some pretty solid guidelines, there's no set of rules cast in stone. To some extent it varies from year to year, depending on the ambitions of the host broadcaster and the discussions that they've been having with the EBU. It may also vary from country to country. Nations like the United Kingdom or Italy have the luxury of numerous cities with the kind of infrastructure that can cope with the contest, whereas smaller countries like, say, Cyprus or Luxembourg or, of course, San Marino may find themselves without quite as many options on their hands. Let's begin with the obvious. Size matters when it comes to hosting the Eurovision Song Contest, which is to say that your host city is going to need an arena-type venue of some kind with a capacity of around 10,000 people. Now, that may not mean you're actually going to be able to fit 10,000 Eurovision fans in on the night once you've factored in the stage and the green room, but it's a decent rule of thumb to work from. The smallest venue to host Eurovision in recent years was the Tel Aviv Arena in 2019, which had a capacity of 7,200. But as the contest grows larger and more ambitious, it's safe to assume we're going to need more space than that in years to come. Now, this is where I have to give a shout out to the Reddit poster Carmen Caramel, who did the hard work last year of drawing up a map and list of all of the countries who have previously competed at Eurovision, or are expressing an interest in doing so in the not too distant future, and indicated which of them do not currently have a suitably sized venue for the contest. We'll put the link to that post up in the episode notes, so you can go and check it out for yourself if you like. One of the countries that jumps out is Cyprus, since of course they came very close to winning in 2018, and there was a lot of discussion in the week of the contest as to where they would actually stage the event if Eleni Ferreira won. Up until recently, Cyprus didn't seem to have an arena suitably sized to host Eurovision, but in recent years they have been making significant investments in their entertainment infrastructure, and it looks as though if they were to win now, they would be able to host at the newly opened City of Dreams complex in Limassol. There are, however, still some countries who regularly compete at Eurovision who don't have a suitably sized venue, such as Albania, Montenegro, Moldova and San Marino. Albania does have some fairly large stadiums which they could use to host the contest if they just added a roof on top, but the best bet for Montenegro, Moldova and San Marino would be to co-host with a neighbouring country and borrow one of their venues. Of course, having a suitable arena isn't the only thing you need to worry about. You can't, after all, stage the contest in a vacuum because you have to think about the huge number of fans and delegations coming to visit, how they're going to get about, and where you're going to put them all. Looking back at when the United Kingdom agreed to host on behalf of Ukraine in 2023, the additional factors that we had to consider beyond the size of the arena were the city had to be served by an international airport, there had to be space for a press centre holding 1,500 journalists, and there had to be ample hotel accommodation for the duration of the contest. This is where Sweden got quite crafty last year with Malmö. As any fan of hit Scandi noir drama The Bridge will tell you, it is just across the Øresund Strait from Copenhagen, which means that they could take advantage of the extra capacity offered by having another major city right nearby, albeit in another country, with plenty of overspill space to accommodate Eurovision fans. And while Malmö does have an international airport, it's a comparatively small one with a limited list of destinations, whereas Copenhagen's spans a much wider range. And if the content I was seeing on social media last year was anything to go by, Copenhagen may not have been the host city, but it's still got a nice little tourism boost from its close proximity to the contest, so everyone's a winner. Another thing that we need to bear in mind when picking a host city is that it needs to be geographically suitable. So, as well as things like having an arena, plenty of hotels, a robust public transport network and a decent airport, it needs to be somewhere that's convenient for the purposes of hosting an event that goes on air at 9 PM Central European Time. As the contest has expanded, the logistics of things like time zones and how far all the delegates would have to travel have to be taken into account too. Generally, when you're dealing with mainland Europe, none of this is really a problem, but victories by Israel and Azerbaijan have pushed the geographical boundaries of the contest when it comes to their turn to host. The 1979 and 1999 contests in Jerusalem are the furthest south that the contest has ever been held, while the 2012 contest in Baku was the furthest east that Eurovision has ever been staged. And with Baku sitting 3 hours ahead of Central European Time during the month of the contest, it doesn't actually start until midnight there, which suggests that realistically that's about as far east as the competition could be held. And of course, ever since Australia made their debut in the contest in 2015, there has been the question of where the contest would be staged in the event of an Australia win. It's not logistically feasible, or for that matter environmentally advisable, to have around 35 delegations travel from Europe to Australia for the contest, not to mention the fact that the local time could be anywhere from 3 AM to 5 AM at the time the contest gets underway. Although there hasn't been an official announcement of what would happen in the event of Australia winning, the general consensus is that they would co-host with a European broadcaster, most likely one of the Big Five countries, and probably Germany. It's also interesting to note that we are currently in the longest run of Eurovision Song Contests held outside of capital cities in the contest's history, the last time it was held in a capital being Lisbon in 2018. There isn't necessarily a specific reason for this, but I think it speaks to a general tendency across Europe to be spreading the wealth outside of capitals right now. After all, capital cities already tend to get the lion's share of tourism, so the Eurovision Song Contest being held in your country is a chance to boost the visibility and income of one of your secondary cities. Whether this is now creating an expectation that Eurovision should be held outside of the capital is another matter. It will be interesting to see what happens in the event that a country wins for the first time and wants to show off their capital city at Eurovision, or indeed that a smaller nation wins and doesn't really have many other options beyond its capital. Interestingly, across the history of Eurovision, there are only 3 host countries who have never held the contest in their capital: Germany, Yugoslavia, and, topically enough, Switzerland. All of this is to say that the record set in 1993 by Mill Street in Ireland, a town with a population of just 1,500 people at the time, as the smallest town ever to host Eurovision, is unlikely to ever be beaten. But I think we all live in hope of the unlikely San Marino victory, where the running gag of the contest being held in Valentina Monetta's back garden becomes a distinct possibility. That's all for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another dive into the eccentric world of Eurovision. But don't forget, in the meantime, you can follow us at bingewatch_pod on Twitter, or me personally at Stephen Perkins. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes, and perhaps even leave us a complimentary review if you feel motivated to do so. Until next time, good night Europe, and good morning Australia and your many time zones.